Men hunger for riches, for power, and for fame. By favor they think they will grow. The battles they fight, the victories they win, are never the victories they know. Brave were the people who lived in these hills. Brave the great warriors who confronted the foe. To defend what is holy, to defend what is true, our Lord on mankind did this duty bestow. Our Lord on mankind did this duty bestow.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Swami Devaki, and with me is Dr. Michelle. And to those of you online, a warm welcome. And we're happy to have you all here today. I'm going to read from Rays of the One Light, and these are weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, and they're written by Swami Kriya-yoga. And today is to each according to his faith. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 3, we read, "Everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God." It is a common experience shared by most people that when a person errs, he experiences a desire to hide that error from his conscience, instead of holding it up for purification. Error clutches its misdeeds to itself and resists correction, though it is only in the state of purity that we can achieve perfect freedom. It requires an act of will to offer that awareness up to the light and to hold it there until one's inner darkness is completely dissipated. For every state of consciousness has its own attractive power, and the more we allow that attraction to act upon us, the more we attract to ourselves the objective circumstances and experiences natural to it. Our faith is the attractive power of our underlying state of consciousness. Goodness attracts goodness. It takes goodness even to see goodness. Evil attracts evil, and it takes evil even to see evil, and that is to take special note of its existence. Whatever there is in your darkness or light, offer it up to the heights. In the supreme light alone will we find salvation. Accept nothing less in yourself as your lasting reality. And as the Bhagavad Gita says in the 12th chapter, "Cling thou to me, clasp me with heart and mind, so shalt thou dwell, surely with me on high. But if thy thought droops from such height, if thou beest weak to set body and soul upon me constantly, despair not. Give me lower service. Seek to reach me, worshiping with steadfast will. And if thou canst not worship steadfastly, work for me. Toil in works pleasing to me. For he that laboreth right for love of me shall finally attain. But if in this thy faint heart fails, bring me thy failure." And thus through the Holy Scripture God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. So I trust that most of you have heard about the Iliad and the Odyssey, and it is Homer, he's Greek. It was his epic poem about the wars, the Trojan Wars. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Odyssey now. If you're a scholar of the Iliad and the Odyssey, know that I'm deviating from that particular book. I'm going to do the Hollywood version, which I felt a little more identity with when I saw the movie. So Ulysses was the king of Ithaca, and he had everything. He had a beautiful wife. She was loving. He loved her dearly. He had his own island and loyal subjects, and he had a child that had just been born to him, a baby boy. But Ulysses was called to Troy because there was a war that was going on there, and he was told that he needed to go and serve. So he didn't go. He went not knowing when he would come back, if indeed he would ever come back. So Ulysses went and he fought in the war valiantly, and the Greeks were starting to lose the war. And so they got on their ships and acted as if they were going to leave. And the Trojans thought that that's what was happening, is that they were going to sail away and that they had won the war. But Ulysses had the brilliant idea of building a large horse. And you all heard of the Trojan horse. So this horse was made out of wood, and it was huge. And it was offered to the Trojans as a gift. And little beknownst to them, inside the horse were Greek soldiers, and that was their ploy. That was how they were going to get inside the area where the Trojans were, inside their palace, I guess. So the horse went in one evening, and the Trojans had been celebrating, and many of them were drunk, and many of them just fell asleep where they were, and not suspecting anything. And then a trap door opens, and quietly the Greeks come out, and they ended the war. They won the war that day because they, of course, caught the Trojans by surprise. So Ulysses was extremely proud of this accomplishment, and he went to Poseidon, who was the god of the Greek seas. And he beat on his chest and he started shouting to Poseidon, "See how great I am? See how wonderful I am? I don't need the gods. I am a god." Well, this didn't sit well with Poseidon. And so Poseidon decided what he would do, and he told this to Ulysses: "You will wander the seas now for the rest of your life, you and your crew. You will never be allowed to return to Ithaca." And of course, Ulysses didn't quite believe him, but as it turned out, indeed he did. He wandered the seas. His ship never set course for Ithaca, and he ended up on all these different islands. One of them was Calypso's island. One of them was the island of the Cyclops, and it goes on and on. It was adventure, but it was also incredible pain and sorrow through these trials. One of them, he ended up with a witch who turned all of his men into different animals. And then he ended up on the island of Aeolus. And Aeolus was a lesser god. He was the god of wind. And he had kind of a grudge against the bigger gods, which was Zeus and Hades and Poseidon, who were brothers. He had a little bit of a edge against them. So he gave Ulysses wind. He gave him a bag, and he said, "In this bag," he was the god of wind. He said, "In this bag is wind that will it will take you further away, or it will bring you closer to Ithaca. But let me warn you, don't open this bag." And so Ulysses fell asleep. And what happened was his men didn't believe him, that they couldn't open the bag, and they thought he was hiding gold in the bag. So while he was asleep, they opened it. And of course, the wind took them even further away from Ithaca. So adventure after adventure, heartbreak after heartbreak, and all of his men were gone. And it was just Ulysses who was left standing. So he goes to Poseidon. He says, What do you want from me? What is it that you want from me?" He said, "I cannot do this without you." And Poseidon said, "Yes, that's exactly right. You cannot do it without the gods." So Ulysses, in his pride, uh, backed away from the gods completely, going on his own, doing it on his own. And as I listened to the reading this morning, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the act of surrender. Now, how do we surrender? Well, the first thing is we have to know that we need God. That's the very first thing. The second thing is you need to submit to the will of God. And the reading this morning was wonderful because we do need to exercise our will, but our will has got to be directed properly, and that is in attunement and alignment with the divine. And it's said of heaven that if you live, that heaven is in harmony, complete harmony. And if you live in harmony, you are in attunement with God's will. So the third is we must trust completely in God's wisdom and his timing. We've got to be able to believe that they're in charge. They possess God in all of his glory. They are one with him. They have their own timing. No matter what we may think, we have still got to relinquish our own self-will to that timing. And we need to stop worrying. Stop with the anxiety. Stop with worrying about your problems and what's going to happen, because God, in his infinite intelligence, gave us light, sound, the 8 aspects of the divine, joy, bliss. These are all things that you can contact in meditation. You can offer yourself to them in body, mind, and soul, and trust that they have their own intelligence, and they will do what is needed. We've got to allow God to rescue us. And as in the Festival of Light, the little bird is struggling, flying, and God says, give yourself into my hands. This is the wind crying to him. Give yourself into my hands. Stop struggling so much. Give yourself over to me. I'll then add my own strength. He's not saying I'm going to do it for you. He's just saying, I'm going to assist you. I'm going to help you now. And then together we can do this. So the last point I want to make is we need to rise above our own faults. We need to acknowledge our faults, our delusions, as in the reading. Those who participate with evil are evil. Those who participate with goodness are good. There's a play that I've done, I've mentioned it a few times, and it's called The Peace Treaty, and written by Swami Kriya-yoga, our founder. And in it, there's 5 clans, and 4 clans are allies, because one clan declares war on one of the clans, one of the other clans. The other 3 clans come and ally with that one clan, and they defeat this evil lord who's called Stolar. So he's defeated, he's killed. And so the clans, the 4 leaders of the allied clans come together, and in this meeting, they have a meeting with the 2 who are now leaders of the clan that was the aggressive clan. But they're explaining that they'd been thrown in prison because Stolar, because they denounced him, so he threw them in prison. So that's really where they were the whole time during the war, and they were trying to explain this to the lords. And it's Antar and Andala. And Antar goes through this whole speech explaining everything. He has a lot of dignity, a lot of integrity. That's what his people saw in him. That's why they moved them into a leadership position after the war. And then, but his wife, who also a lot of integrity and dignity, was not as forgiving. His wife was still bitter and still angry over what Stolar had done. And she expressed this anger and this hatred. And Kovar, who's the head of the allied clans, he's the head of the philosophy clan. That's his clan. And the thing with Kovar, it's very interesting. He operates only with his mind. He doesn't have a heart. He doesn't have compassion. He operates from an intellectual level. And he turns to Lady Angela after she spews this anger and this hatred. Her husband comes to her and says, you know, Stolar is going to have to answer to a tribunal that's much higher than what we can do. But what of us? Are you going to live in hatred? Are you going to let yourself be buried in that? And of course, this is Kovar stands up and he says, well, Lord Antar, he said, what you're saying is beyond reproach. He said, but Lady Angela, well, she's after my own heart because she shows that she's human. And Lady Angela looks at him and she says, the bitterness I feel, it's my shame. It's not my pride. She said, I'd rather be defined by my potentials than by my faults. And that's what we have to do. We have to uplift each other. We have to look to each other and not focus on our faults. Goodness sees goodness. Swami Kriya-yoga one time was out with a group of disciples, and there was a couple that was with them. And one of the, after they left, the couple was actually quite negative. And after they left, one of the devotees turned to Swami and said, wow, they were really negative. And Swami just, he was a little taken aback and he said, oh, wow. I didn't notice. He said, I was praying for them the whole time. And that's how Swami was. He saw the highest in everyone, and he made it his mission to try to draw that out of others. And that's what we need to do now. We need to draw this out of each other. If you've been coming to Ananda for a long time, know that you are part of our community as much as anyone is. And if this is your first time, Swami always talked about Ananda as a movement, and consider yourself a part of that movement. And we need to uplift each other. We need to see the highest in each other so that we all can grow closer and closer to the divine.
Thank you, Devaki. Living in these bodies on this planet, we have a tendency to think that everything that's happening around us is all taking place solely on this physical reality. And it's not that way at all. Everything starts first in the realm of consciousness. And then it gathers energy before it finally manifests in the physical plane of existence. We only see with our eyes the final outward manifestation. And the reality is that we're all literally swimming in a sea, a big ocean of consciousness, which most of the time, most of the people on this planet are really unaware of. Now, this ocean of consciousness has many different currents in it. And each of us, by virtue of our thoughts, our desires, our past karmas, the vrittis in our astral spine, will be magnetically attracted will get pulled by certain ones of these currents. And as our reading says this morning, every state of consciousness has its own attractive power. And the more we allow that attraction to act upon us, the more we attract to ourselves the objective circumstances and experiences natural to it. So, among these many different currents of consciousness, there are going to be some that will draw us toward the light, that will uplift our consciousness. And there'll be many, many others that either just kind of spin us off sideways, away from the light, or potentially even draw us down into more negative experiences. And so, as devotees seeking to know God, it behooves us to really try to pay attention to and develop an awareness of these different currents of consciousness and what potential they may have on our own consciousness. And so this morning I want to talk about a few currents of consciousness and some potential ways that we might respond to them. And before I go into the three main currents that I want to talk about this morning, I just want to mention in passing that since we just finished a Raja Yoga class recently, that Patanjali, the ancient exponent of yoga, described very clearly 10 different states of consciousness, 5 that we should control or limit, because if we engage in them, they tend to sort of pull us away. These are the yamas, to avoid or control greed, violence, lying, stealing, sensuality. And then he described 5 currents of consciousness that help draw us upward toward God. The niyamas: cleanliness, contentment, austerity, self-study, and devotion to God. So those are all wonderful ones to study, but they're not the ones I'm going to focus on this morning. The ones I really felt to talk about this morning, the first one I'm going to talk about is fear, because I think this is a current of consciousness that's very prevalent on our planet and in our country at this time. And especially if you have a tendency to worry, you might find yourself getting that amped up a little bit. And I was very blessed recently to spend some time in seclusion up at our forest hermitage. And one of the books that I took with me is this one that came out, I think, late last year from the Wisdom of Yogananda series on how to live without fear. And let me tell you, there are some amazing gems in here. I'm only going to share a few this morning, but I encourage you to read this book. Yogananda described anger, fear, and worry as mental bacteria. And he talked about how these germs can affect both our physical and mental health. He said that fear throws a veil over intuition and robs you of your confidence to master your difficulties. And he provided several different examples of ways that we can combat this mental bacteria, this current of consciousness of fear. He encouraged people to go on worry fasts, to feast regularly on the Society of Joyful Minds. We do the tensing and releasing with the double breath frequently as part of our meditation practice. Catch this. He says, inhaling, contract the body. As you hold, absorb the emotion, then relax, exhaling, and think that nervousness has left you with your relaxation. Interesting technique. He talks about the power of calmness to overcome all obstacles. And he says, a sunny mentality contains the ultraviolet rays that kill all mental bacteria. He says, by faithful practice, you can divert the attention from worry to peace through meditation. And then there's this wonderful piece of reassurance, which I think is for all of us. He says, remember, no matter how great your trials may be, you are able to conquer them. God will not suffer you to be tempted and tried beyond your strength. So that's fear. Now, there's another one of those mental bacteria in that list I want to talk about next, which is anger. As I mentioned, I was on seclusion recently, and about day 5 or 6, I'm trying to get into longer, deeper, thirsty meditations, and I'm noticing, much to my dismay, that I was having a lot of thoughts about work that were coming up. And not only were they thoughts about work, but there was a lot of anger associated with those thoughts. And I was really bothered by this because not only was it distracting me from what I was trying to do in my seclusion, but I was acutely aware that I did not like how I felt as a result of that anger. And so I prayed to Master, like, Master, I need some help here. I've got an anger problem. Most of you who know me don't think I have an anger problem. But what I meant here was not that I was losing my temper, but that I was hanging on to stuff that I didn't need to be hanging on to anymore. And that it was disturbing how I felt. And I was like, Master, this, and realizing that it was keeping me from going deeper in my seclusion. And so I prayed for some guidance, and I started thinking about, well, what can I do while I'm here on seclusion to try to release this, try to release the hold that this has on me. So one of the things that I did was when I go up there for a week, I like to do some work on the land, and a couple of our members had built some burn piles up there. So I lit one of these burn piles, and once the fire sort of calmed down, we have a bumper crop of pine cones this year. Anybody needs pine cones? I can tell you where to get them. And thanks to everyone, the handful of souls who came up yesterday for the work day, really, really transformed things. And if you didn't make it, there's another opportunity coming up in 4 weeks. Please come. But I took these pine cones and I just started chanting the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, as we do every morning here as part of our fire ceremony. And these are big, pointy, almost sharp in places pine cones. And I was just, much as we do with the seeds of rice, tossing them into the fire. Master, I offer this anger to you. It's keeping me from experiencing your joy, your peace. Please take this. Please relieve me of this. And I also, in my Kriya meditation, was offering that up. There's a lovely practice that's in the Raja Yoga book that Swami offers, of visualizing at the end of the day a mental bonfire and just tossing everything in there. And he offers these words. He says, I cast my thoughts, desires, and all past karma into thy flames of love. Make me whole. Make me pure. Make me one with thee. And then again in this book, Yogananda offers this beautiful visualization meditation on spreading ripples of peace. And I did that too. And I'm not going to claim that the anger is all gone. I think that would be a little presumptuous. But what I will say is that after doing all of that, and really just wholeheartedly trying to offer this up and offer it to Master, I did feel freer. And it ceased to bother me the rest of the time that I was in seclusion. I want to share one other quick story about anger, and this is a story that Swami Kriyananda tells in his autobiography, The New Path. There was a certain man who was involved in one of the centers there who was very devoted. His name was Mr. Jacot. And Mr. Jacot had discovered that through trickery, somebody else at one of these centers was planning this scheme that was going to get them into trouble, the center into trouble, and cause a lot of problems for them. And so Mr. Jacot publicly disclosed what was going on with this man. And Yogananda thanked Mr. Jacot for saving them from a really perilous situation. But he also admonished him gently. He said, the good that you did could have been much greater if you had done so by peaceful means. And Swami goes on to say that Mr. Jacot did not take those words to heart, and he did not curb his tendency toward righteous anger. And as a result of that, he gradually developed judgmental attitudes and left. So it's important to realize as devotees that even some of these currents of consciousness that we get caught up in, if they're not, it may seem right at the time, but if it's really not aligned with the light, can pull us away in ways that we might not want. And then one final current of consciousness I'm going to talk about is negativity. And Devaki touched on this briefly, I think, but there's a great story, again, from Swami's book, The New Path. When Swami was very young on the path, he had recently joined Yogananda's work. And when Yogananda finally decided that he was not going to be able to establish a community in Encinitas at the temple there was kind of this drive to organize his work along more monastic lines. And even though Yogananda didn't really say a whole lot about it at the time, many of the disciples sort of got caught up in this organizing. And a few of the monks got very negative about, why hasn't this been done before? And so they formed this committee, and they asked Swami to be on this committee, and they had a lot of meetings and a lot of complaining. And one day, one of the monks, charges into Swami's room and says, "One of the nuns has decided not to obey the latest directive of the committee." And Swami's like, "Oh no, well, we have to do something about this." So they go running in and they start yelling and to this one of the nuns. And Yogananda gets ear of this, what happened. And Swami writes in his book that he, Swami, received the best tongue lashing from Yogananda that he had heard anybody ever receive. And initially, as Yogananda was doing this, it was like, well, Master, I was hardly even involved in this. But then he realized, he said, "In heeding the negative criticisms of my older brother disciples, I had fallen from what had seemed to me good motives into judgmental attitudes, forever inimical to love." So I'll just end by encouraging us all to take these words from our reading this morning to heart, that whatever there is of darkness or light that is within us, to offer it up to the heights. In the supreme light alone, we find salvation. A couple of weeks ago, Aaron was here from Ananda village and talked about how we're all children of the light. And we need to remember that. We need to remember that that is our true reality. We need to remind each other of that. And that the more we identify with that light, the more we attune ourselves to it, the more we invite that light to change our consciousness. And then one day we'll realize, not just intellectually, but with divine realization, that we are that light. God bless you all.
Though green summer fade and winter draw near, my Lord, in your presence I live without fear. Through tempests, through snows, through turbulent tide, the touch of your hand is my strength and my guide. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. and destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. The dancers will pass, the singing must end. I welcome the